Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today I'm going to be talking about astrological mavericks. Do you have what it takes to change the world? I want to welcome everyone today as we head into fall and start this new journey towards the end of the year. All righty. So years ago, so here's a little bit of my chart. You can see that I have Mars on my midheaven. And it was a very interesting experience learning about astrology and then learning about, obviously, all of these little wormholes about astrology. But something started happening a few years ago where I was talking to people and understanding or seeing that I was really not aware of my Mars function and the power it played out in my life and how it affected other people. And so I started thinking about it a little bit, and I decided to go through and start to see what happens when people have planets on the angle. And it seems like it is a little bit of a, I'm finding that it makes a big impact in people's lives. And so what I did is I went through and I decided to, let me move this little bar thing out of the way. 48 points. So we got the 4 angles, which is the ascendant, the IC, the descendant, and the MC, or the midheaven, and all of the signs, and for each planet. So for each planet, you got 48 placements. Then you have 11 planets, 12 signs. I'm including Chiron, by the way. It's 132 times 4 angles is 528 examples. So what I'm doing is I'm going through and I did a search on SolarFire, put in particular placements of planets on each angle. So as you can see on the table above with the sun through Aries and through each of the 4 angles, I did each of these, did a search on them, and then came up with people's names. And then what I'm in the process of doing, because I'm only actually up to Jupiter at this point, is writing stories about each one of those individuals as far as how we know about what they've done in history and how they affected society. So I'll kind of go through it a little bit, but it was just one of those things where I kind of realized that there's, this aspect that happens when we have, we always talk about the power of the angles and how they affect people. But I didn't really see that much about people with planets on the angles. And so what I found is that there's a way that people, well, I'll just go through it, sorry. So what is a maverick? A maverick is an unorthodox or an independent-minded person. It can be the unbranded range animal, especially a calf that has become separated from its mother, traditionally considered the property of the first person who brands it. This kind of goes to the American West, and actually, I would imagine probably around in other places as well, where people are taking care of their animals. And my favorite story comes from Gordon Dixon's book called Maverick, which is a word meaning someone without the ownership mark all his herd fellows wear, burned into their hides. Every society has a few mavericks. You can tell us by our distinguishing marks if you know what to look for. For one thing, we refuse to live by the herd rules, so we're forced to make up our own rules instead and then live by them. So if any of you have planets on the angle and kind of understand that one, I'd love to hear from you. The word is also from Samuel A. Maverick, who was an American pioneer and rancher who on purpose did not brand his cattle because everyone else around him did. So it kind of gave him the sense of like, not being marked was actually being marked, which is kind of an interesting kind of a setup. And in the case of a planet conjunct the angle, the planet gives the individual the opportunity to set new rules of archetypal engagement and makes the person a hyper-expressive example of that planet. I find that the planet can operate like a singleton, feral, or orphan planet in that it is highly realized and present. I mean, it's really obvious to people. Like a friend of mine said, Fred Steinman, he says it's like nailing a planet to the cross. And they operate independently from the relational, familial, and societal norms. And again, with my Mars in the midheaven, I was kind of surprised that, people talk about, that they find me pushy, they find me harsh sometimes or too much. And so I really had to kind of start looking at like how this dynamic plays out. And it really elevates the planet, as we'll see. There we go. So the cross of incarnation, or the 4 faces of the self. So again, as we said before, the ascendant, which is here on the left, usually in traditional sense, we think of that point there between Pisces and Aries as kind of that ascendant line, but it can happen obviously anywhere. It's the moment of birth. It's the first breath of air we take and separate ourselves from our mothers. It's the face of and for the self. It's how we see the world and how the world sees us. The Coeli is the face of and the face for the family. The descendant is the face of and for the other. And for the medium coeli, or the midheaven, we say the face of or the face for the public. So the ascendant, so what I like to think about when it comes to the ascendant is, if you think about wearing glasses, and you see this woman here on the left-hand side, wonderful photo by Felicia Marshall. And I love it because she's wearing these big, big pink glasses. And so when you think about it, when you wear rose-colored glasses or any colored glasses, that's how you're going to see the world. So I colored this view over here so you can see it's all in pink. But also, everyone who sees you, like if you look at her eyes or her face through these, you're going to see pink. It's like when you sit in a greenhouse. That is one of the ways I like to think of the ascendant. You know, it's whatever color that greenhouse is by sign is how people are going to see you and how you're going to see the ascendant. And as we said, the greenhouse effect. And of course, usually that's associated with Aries. The Coeli is how I meet my inner family self, and how my inner family self meets me or my family. You know, it can play out in a few different ways. And how I like to think of it is who I am by myself behind closed doors. This is, people talk about the 12th house as being a very private and very sacred place for people, but I think the 4th house is actually a really crucial one for this. And so, the IC is that place, who we are behind closed doors is kind of our true self, who we really show to people. A nice little hummy sense, 4th house. The 7th house, the descendant is how I meet other and how others meet me, associated typically with Libra. Or who am I in relationship to you? It's a really important way to look at it. Of course, Libra is always working for balance. So, we have to make sure that relating properly, going back and forth. And then the medium coeli, or the midheaven, is how I meet my path and how my path meets me. Or in this case, why did the Capricorn cross the road? Or what is my path in life and how the public see my work? And the reason why the Capricorn crossed the road is because he was told there was a mountain over there. So what makes a planet on the angle so special? The influence of the angles is similar to that of the cardinal signs, such as Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn, as we just went through. They are concerned with making manifest and concrete, with bringing out into the open, unveiling and manifesting whatever may be latent in the personality and everything that is denoted by the signs and the planets connected with the angles. This is from Alan Leo in his book on esoteric astrology. There are hints and good juicy bits here and there, which really are nice about it, but it's been fun kind of exploring it. And the other part really kind of got me off on this was years ago talking to Aaron Sullivan, who was good friends with Michel Gauguin. And he wrote a book on cosmic influences. He actually was in the process of trying to denounce astrology, or not really. He wasn't really expecting to have the level of response and proof shown up with the studies that he did. But you can see by reading this, he did 25,000 European professionals listen to who's who, went through their birth examples, and he found a very highly statistical relevance to people in certain professions falling into certain things. And it was always when these planets happen in certain places within the chart. Known as the Gauguin factor. Michel also has planets in the angle, by the way, which we'll go into after in a little bit. So let's see. Let me get this. So you can see on his chart, I wish there was a way to make this smaller. Okay, I guess I just have to go with it. So for him, he has Jupiter conjunct his midheaven. He has Mercury conjunct his IC. I think, yeah, that was it, right? And I mark these. There we go. Opposition to, which even adds it more intensely. And I love this quote from his wife. He was something of a medieval tyrant and not too easy to live with. um, what I'm finding too with these, and again, like when we get into the examples, will be even more clearly. But it's one of those things where it's almost like the individual is impelled to live these archetypes. Like with him, I mean, if you think like a medieval tyrant, I mean, Jupiter in Taurus, and a Mercury in Scorpio. I mean, Mercury in Scorpio is going to tell you however he feels and what he wants and exactly how he wants it. And that Jupiter in Taurus is going to know that it has to be done perfectly. So, but it hyper does it. And I think the benefit for the individuals who have these planets is that we don't understand we're being any different than anyone else. The hardship is for the people around us who have to deal with it. And so there has to be some kind of a way that we kind of calm ourselves a little bit and make it a little nicer, or also too, for our friends to be strong enough to, say, hey, you need to calm down with that. The other thing I find is really interesting, we'll talk about a little bit, is people with planets on the angle also tend to hang out with other people with planets on the angle. Because I think, if you have a little bit of a strong, intense energy about you, you're typically going to need someone who's going to be strong enough alongside you to be in relationship with you as far as friends and or private, your personal relationship. So what happens when a planet is found on the angle? I say there's an apparent augmented sense of self. And I say apparent because, and you guys are watching me, so you guys can say, but I can come across as very cocky and very full of myself, but it's more really that Mars that really, it just puts me in, especially since it's in Virgo. My personal one is stationing to retrograde. So it's a pretty powerful Mars, and it's right up there at the top of the chart. It's activated, and one of the things I notice for myself is I don't really have any trouble inserting myself into situations. That Mars is really good at inserting. And I don't, until people tell me that I'm being pushy or something, I just feel like, it's my excitement. And so it's that wonderful thing of like where a person's sense of themselves can be a little bit different than what other people's experiences of them. And so it's important to kind of have a dialogue, obviously. They are supercharged archetypal planetary expressions clothed in the sign. And what I mean by that is that so like with Mars, like how I was just saying, it inserts itself. Mercury is going to be, something that's going to want to communicate, strongly, clearly. Jupiter is going to want to have space and want to be able to expand. Then it's going to be flavored by whatever sign it's in. As far as, like with my Mars in Virgo, then mine is going to be about perfecting. Mine is a perfecting Mars, is how I would see it. The goal is that it wants to actually, it finds where things aren't going right and it wants to make it better. So it's that thing of like how it'll work, and then flavoring it with the sign, and then you can kind of get a sense of it. But I think almost there's a purity in the sign, but even more so, I think there's a purity in the expression of what the planetary need is. And especially when you think about each planet as having a need, then you can kind of understand why they get expressed the way they do. Again, this gives the native an edge that is readily felt and seen by others, but not usually by the native. They know the rules, but either don't think they're relevant or think they are somehow not subject to them. When I gave this talk at NORWAC last year, it was really interesting because I think everyone in the room except for one person had planets on the angles. And I asked them, I said, how do you, when you hear there are rules or something, how do you work with it? And it's interesting. It's like, it's kind of like learning how to color, a coloring book. In the beginning, you learn how to, color within the lines and everything. And then, you're like, hey, I don't need to follow these lines. I can do my own thing. I'd like to put a sun over here and add these other figures. And, that's kind of like what happens with these maverick planets is like, it's not, someone can say this is how you need to do it, but they're going to just kind of do their own thing anyway. And it's not out of a sense, again, out of arrogance. It's just they think that's probably the right way to do it. And like I said earlier, people with planets on an angle flock together. I think that has to do, like I said earlier, with the power of the planets and the power of the person who's holding it or wearing that. And then also, I think it helps us to understand that that our actions have effect, and also that typically with other people who have planets on the angle, they're strong enough to hopefully tell you when you're out of line. So it's really, can be helpful for self-gauging. And as and everything with astrology, such placements do not give consciousness. Consciousness versus unconscious expressions, as well as ideal and lovely expressions, right alongside of shocking and less than lovely expressions. As we're going to see, I have some really, I love the examples that come up. And how many of people are in the population? How many people allow that force out within themselves or learn to channel it productively? I don't really know. I would think that the chances of people being born with a planet on the angle is pretty high. And what I would like to see kind of is like, what can we do to start activating that? What can we do to make sure that these planets are being activated in the highest possible way, in the highest expression possible for the benefit of not only that individual, but whatever that individual is here to create as an archetype or to lay out for our society or for our humanity. I love this quote. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them because they change things. They invent, they imagine, they heal, they explore, they create, they inspire, they push the human race forward. Maybe they have to be crazy. While some see them as the crazy ones, we see genius because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. The interesting thing with this quote is that I actually cannot, and if anyone has or knows where this actually started, I'd really love to hear it. But I've seen this quote attributed to Steve Jobs, who actually did not have any planets on the angle, believe it or not. And I don't know of anyone who can be called more of a maverick of a time period than what he was able to create, but we'll leave that there. Rob Siltonen, John McAfee, and my friend Tracy Stranger, who is an astrologer. Those of you who are out in Australia might know her. She has a great selection of astrology CDs. She attributed this to Einstein. But it really makes you think. It really, I was watching something a little while back, and I think it's called the Wayfarers, this Wayseers, this Wayfarer. I forget what the guy's who's working on it, but his whole thing is that he talks about back around the 1400s, there was a new DNA gene that was introduced. And what it did was something that allowed people to start being able to think outside the box. Because when you think about it, if you're a farmer and your family's been farming for hundreds of years, you're going to use the same way until something makes you change. Well, with ice ages and other little mini things that happen, you need humanity to have people who think outside the box to be able for the rest of humanity to survive. And so what they're finding is that there's actually a DNA piece that actually is kind of like this wild card thing as well, that doesn't have to do obviously with the planets, but it's this ability for people to be able to think outside the box. And so this is where I think, where some people can vilify these people with planets on the angles, I think it's really important to kind of understand and see it kind of, hold in place in the context of what it is that these individuals are bringing. And obviously not every single person with a planet on the angle is here to change the world, but I would encourage all of us to do that. All right, now we're getting into the fun part with doing the examples of people. So Kurt Cobain, the singer who unfortunately killed himself, Uranus, Pluto in Virgo on the ascendant, and Chiron, Saturn, and in Pisces on the descendant. So you can see, kind of an effect. Look at the music he did, the shockingly transformative work that he did. And he was not, and then that depth of feeling and personality, was up there in that Pisces. And David Beckham, soccer star, Sun in Capricorn on the IC, and Mercury in Taurus on the ascendant. Not only is he well known as a football or soccer star, but he's also known for style. He and his wife are really well known as far as their fashion senses. So Mercury in Taurus on the ascendant, he dresses up nicely, goes out and he's a spokesperson. He's a spokesman for a lot of different businesses. And movement, of course, Mercury in Taurus, that's movement. He's a soccer player. So, okay. And then we have Liv Tyler, Sun and Mercury conjunct the ascendant in Cancer. and Moon in Capricorn on the descendant. Little switch from David there, but just that real, she has that real dreamy quality, you know, and kind of interesting because you think of that as Mercury ascendant in Cancer. You know, her father, of course, is Steven Tyler from Aerosmith, so, you know, the musical inclination. But, you know, there's just this warming, welcoming piece to her, you know, that you feel very immediately welcome with that Cancerian energy. Jean Dixon, who was a well-known astrologer of the 20th century, Moon in Leo on the IC and Mars Saturn on the MC in Aquarius. She was a phenomenal, I mean, Moon in Leo on the IC. She was a phenomenal, what do I want to say, self-promoter. She really worked the angle with astrology as far as being predictive, and she was really great at putting out what she was predicting. Her prediction rates weren't really all that high, but she was really good at promoting herself, which was good. And then, you know, Saturn, Mars, and Aquarius on the midheaven. I mean, she's an astrologer, and she was really out there pushing herself out there. Like I was saying, you know, Mars inserts itself, Saturn creates a structure. Saturn's the ruler of Aquarius, so it makes sense that she'd be a really well-known astrologer. Prince William, with Sun and Moon in Cancer on the descendant. Real strong influence, obviously, from his mother, Lady Diana, who was a Cancer, and really well known. I mean, she made a very significant impact on him, and he also wears it within his own chart as well. Sun and Moon conjunct in Cancer on the descendant. Probably, you know, he'd make a good ruler. I mean, it'd be interesting to see what happens with the British royal line in the future, along with the rest of the world in the future, the way things are going lately. But yeah, I think, you know, he with that Cancerian part, but training from his mother, really, Lady Di brought a lot of love and heart into the Windsor family. And then, of course, Jack Kerouac, because in the end, you won't remember the time you spent working in the office or mowing your lawn. Climb that goddamn mountain. One of the beatniks. Another one of his lines: live, travel, adventure, bless, and don't be sorry. Do you think you might know what sign this might be showing up in? Yeah, Mars in Sagittarius on the IC. I mean, beatniks. I mean, these guys were really about following their own path, you know, and not being sorry for it. Very dynamic individual, Jack Kerouac was, and got some more stuff on him after. So, does anyone have any questions so far at this point? Looking pretty good.
Is there one angle stronger than the others, or are they all about the same?
That's a really good question. I have actually seen just as much strength in any of the angles as any of the other ones. So, and as we get in the examples, we'll kind of see it, but I really haven't seen anything. At first I thought, oh, well, you know, I could see maybe the midheaven being more, or I could see the ascendant being more, but I see just as much of a strength in the IC, in the Coeli, as well as the descendant.
Great, thank you.
Sure. Do you happen to have a plan on your angle, on an angle, Linda?
Oh yes, I've got Neptune on the ascendant.
Perfect.
Uranus on the midheaven. I've got Chiron on the 4th.
Perfect.
And nothing on the 7th.
Well, that's good. It probably gives you a little rest. And so what do? I mean, you know, it's kind of funny because here, you know, we've got your stock photo, because I think this is very kind of a Neptune and on the ascendant kind of a thing. You know, you got your stock photo, which is really nice. Like, here I am. And then what are you doing? Uranus and Uranus midheaven. I mean, and Chiron and on your IC, you know, you're bringing it, you're bringing education of astrology to people. You're making your mark on that. That's really beautiful.
Certainly. Thank you.
Congratulations. Awesome.
Hi, Michael. This is Patrice. I have a question.
Sure, please.
The nodes, what about the nodes on the angle? And then how far, I know you're talking about planets being on the actual angles, but are we looking at the angle houses? So like Sun in the 10th, but not real close. Is that considered too? They're in the house, but they're not right on the midheaven.
Right. Well, first of all, for me, like, I do whole sign houses, so it makes it really simple for me. But I first started doing it, so I kind of had set orbs, and then now I'm actually trying to do it so that it's actually just where the angle is in that sign and the planet is in the sign. And I have to admit, I'm giving a little bit, some of the orbs I'm giving a little more freedom with, because I'm seeing the reality of them working. So, I mean, just like how I say with astrology in general, I think first and foremost is, see what your experience is with it. The tighter the orb, the better is always great. But, in some of these cases, I mean, I've seen these orbs happen, 6, 10, 12 degrees out, and there's still, these people made their mark, and I'm not seeing really anything else that would lend that sort of a strength to the chart. As far as the nodes, I have not looked at the nodes at all. I have to admit, because I just wanted to kind of keep it as simple as possible. And my real goal with it was I wanted to have a book that people who were astrology based as well as non-astrology would be interested in. I always think, whenever I think, my schooling in college was psychology, and one of the things that kept me awake out of the psychology books were actually the case studies. And so what I kind of look at is these are basically a bunch of case studies. So you would look up, say you'd look up Mars and Sagittarius, and you'll see people's names, and you'll see what it was about that person that I perceived in their life through looking on the internet. I do searches if I'm not aware of who the person's name is, and ideally, what I want to see is that when I bring up that person's information, there should be something pretty easy that shows that represents that information or represents that playing out. I've had a few where I cannot find that person has exhibited that at all. So, I mean, I've actually had, the complete opposite, where I haven't seen anything. And as far as the nodes, I felt like to add the nodes to a book that would be more for the general population, that might lose them a little bit. So that's why I didn't include the nodes. But I'd be interested. Do you have nodes? Do you have the nodes conjunct one of your angles, Patrice?
Yeah, I have the South Node, North Node on my ascendant and descendant, and I also have Chiron. It's in my 9th house, but it's a tight orb to the midheaven.
Perfect. And so, based on kind of what I'm saying, as far as what it appears like when planets are on the angle, what do you notice? Anything that has charged that you feel particularly that you've noticed, in learning about astrology, how that nodal cross ascendant descendant line operate with one another that you haven't been able to hear from anyone else?
Haven't been able to say more about that. Not sure I'm following you.
Meaning that, I mean, so what I'm hearing you say is you have a question about this, but have you been able to have anyone kind of say anything about that?
Well, you are today, I think.
Well, I'm kind of not, because I haven't touched the node. So I'm sorry. I'm trying to understand, as far as, let's see, what's the right way to say this? So if we think of the nodal axis so then what I would say is, what are your relationships with people like?
Well, I would say that, because I think of the moon, being an evolutionary astrologer, it's conscious in my face. It's in my face that the self versus other. And then I also have a conjunction to Mars with my North Node. It's a wide orb. So that, is putting some power there to that, is that I'm just feeling it as you talk about it, is that I do embody that. It seems to be, because I'm aware of it, it seems to be pretty predominant energy, self versus other, Aries, Libra, in relationships are a big deal to me, and my expression of myself too. So
yeah, I would think so.
Very much so.
I would think so. Yeah, that's an interesting. That's a good possibility for later on to think about adding in the nodes on that. But I like that. Yeah, I would think they would really, especially with the ascendant descendant line. I mean, I would think that. Do you have your ascendant and your North Node are the same? Did you say, or is it South Node and ascendant?
The descendant North Node conjunct Mars in Sagittarius.
Descendant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's, and then how about for you as far as keeping in touch with people from your past?
Well, I'm a 4th house Pluto, so conjunct Jupiter. So, yeah, I mean, that's easy for me. I mean, I live my past.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, because I was going to say, yeah, it's that interesting, that flip. So it's like, yeah, it's that part. I mean, I think in the sense, yeah, it's like you. It's funny because almost like you have to kind of be a little bit of this Jack Kerouac in a way, this playfulness, and with that Mars, it's going to be really, you're going to be really driven to be in relationship, to be dealing with other people, to probably. I think of Sagittarius as having such an amazing optimism with people. There's a lot of patience, and there's a lot of compassion, and a lot of laughter.
Yeah, and I don't want to take too much more time, but also, let's not forget my Chiron in the sign of Aquarius on, my midheaven. So that adds, interesting dynamic too.
So, and are you teaching astrology?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. Yeah. Really, really crucial. So, and are you recently into astrology, or you been for a while?
Oh, about 8 years.
Okay, cool. So you've got a lot more to do.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah, exactly.
Wonderful,
yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Any other questions? Okay.
I had a question.
Oh, sure. Yes.
Kind of went over it. I was going to ask about the nodes of the moon. I too have the nodes conjunct my ascendant, north node on the ascendant, south node on the descendant. So just hearing you talk with Patrice was helpful. So I guess I would have asked about the planetary nodes next, because I also have the north node of Neptune conjunct my ascendant.
See those, I mean, that brings in a whole realm. I mean, I would really welcome anyone who wants to study on that. I think it'd be really great because it can bring up a lot. And I think for you, with yours, with the ascendant, with the north node, is like, the key then for you is really about you being you in relationship with other. And then with Patrice, it's like, how to learn who other is and be in relationship with other. I think it's almost like that difference with the flip of the nodes. But you guys probably know a little bit more because I know with evolutionary astrology, the nodes are really crucial. So I would love anyone who ends up doing a little bit of work on it, or does, is able to bring up a little bit of information. I'd be happy to hear about it and kind of look through it, because it sounds real exciting. But thank you. That's awesome. Any other questions, Della? Okay.
Nope, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, good. And then another Sagittarian thing: practice kindness all day to everybody, and you will realize you're already in heaven now. I mean, that's the penultimate Sagittarian desire. And, I mean, with that being on his IC, he was quite a loner. He was very charismatic. I know sexually he was he was quite attracted to men and women. I understand he was bi, but he was also very, I don't think he was very sexual. I mean, I think in that kind of very Sagittarian way, even with Mars there, I mean, his sexiness was his ability to go out there and be a wanderer, for him to find out what the truth is, to see, through, one foot in front of the other, that Sagittarian thing, shoot the arrow in the air and let's see where we go. It's a beautiful expression of it. So you can see how he really, played that out. And again, this is who he was. When you think about the 1950s, early 60s, when the beatniks came out and, they were starting to express this stuff. I mean, it was in reaction to all the stuff from the 1950s, all that rigidity. And, and so you have these people who were born, who just needed to really break out. And obviously Jack was one of them. Joan Quigley was Nancy Reagan's astrologer. She had Mercury conjunct her descendant in Pisces. And I love it because obviously, she communicated with all the planets, one and all, and using her intuition, and then communicated it to Nancy Reagan. So it was this, she got out there. It was great. And then this guy. And you've got to really laugh at this one. I'm sorry. I mean, as any astrologer has got to look at this one. It's hilarious. So this is, MC Hammer. You can't touch this because you can't catch it. Sun in Aries on the MC Hammer. What does Aries want to do? It wants to pound things. I mean, it's like you can't make this stuff up sometimes. It's really funny how that shows up. Yeah. And then what I love, this one covers so many really beautiful aspects. So here's Marilyn Monroe in the wedding, in the dress that she was sewn into for JFK's happy birthday or birthday ceremony. And John F. Kennedy, President John F. Kennedy, and Jacqueline Kennedy, and Ted Kennedy. Or Bobby, sorry. It was all Bobby. They all have planets on the angle. So it kind of gives you a sense. And, you know, when you think about it, especially, I mean, Jackie Onassis and Jackie Kennedy and Jack Kennedy, they, you know, it was Camelot. I mean, it would make sense that they would have planets in the angle. This was creating a whole new kind of world there at, in Washington. And this is an interesting one too. Charles Manson and the Manson family. He just passed away, actually. I can't believe, I mean, he really survived a long time there in prison. Can move this up here. So, and then the interesting thing with these guys is, I mean, we've just got kind of a lot of scorpionic energy, which one would expect from the terror these individuals wreaked in California and elsewhere. Charles Manson has Jupiter and Mercury in Scorpio conjunct his descendant. So, I mean, and this guy had some very interesting relationships. There's an interesting series that was done on, I think I saw it on Netflix, called Aquarius, believe it or not. And it's about the Manson thing. I started watching and I was kind of intrigued because I haven't been born right around that, well, haven't been a little kid around that time. I didn't really know too much about it, but I want to really kind of go back and know, because it's very interesting what these people did and what happened at this time. So, and then also has Pluto and Cancer on the IC. So, I mean, really, you know, very, very powerful. I mean, who's gonna tattoo a swastika on your forehead? I mean, that's a scorpionic thing. I mean, that's a branding. I mean, literally, talk about a branding. There's branding. So Susan Atkins, Chiron in Scorpio on the MC, a lot better than how Patrice is using her Chiron. I mean, Patrice is using her Chiron a lot better than Susan used hers. Sorry, Patrice. Patricia Krenwinkel with her Chiron in Scorpio also, but hers is on her ascendant, and Leslie Van Houten with her Saturn in Virgo on the ascendant. He really, you know, Mercury, Jupiter in Scorpio. I mean, this is, you know, that's Svengali, that's Rasputin. I mean, that's a very, it's a real manipulation picture. That's someone who, if they understand anything about psychology and emotional abilities of people, it's someone who can really wreak some damage on people. And he really did do that, unfortunately. I love this one. Same placement, opposite expression. Ted Bundy and John Carpenter from the Carpenters. Those of you who remember the Carpenters, who sang back in the 60s and 70s. Karen Carpenter's little brother, I think bigger brother. So I'm just going to hear some lines from each of them. Both of them have Mercury in Scorpio on the IC, on the Quelli, the bottom of the chart. So John Carpenter's songs, I love this when you read them together, but I mean, when you take them apart, it's like they sound so scorpionic. I won't last a day without you, hurting each other, and yesterday once more. I mean, these are all very, you know, very scorpionic lines. And Ted Bundy, for those of you who don't know Ted Bundy, he was a serial killer, another charismatic individual, hello, Mercury in Scorpio. Many of my lady friends who are around in the areas where he was doing his murders and the horrible things he did were concerned, because they said if they had met him in person, they probably would have also been taken. There was just a way that he was able to comport himself, carry himself with others, that made them feel at ease until they didn't. So he says, I am the most cold-hearted son of a bitch you'll ever meet. We serial killers are your sons, we are your husbands, we are everywhere, and there will be more of your children dead tomorrow. And third quote, I don't think anybody doubts whether I've done some bad things. The question is what, of course, and how, and maybe even most importantly, why. I mean, you can see, you know, there's, he wasn't stupid. He was an intelligent man. And I think that's even what was even more scary to people, you know, the things that he did, because there was unfortunately an awareness of what it was that he was doing, a consciousness. And it's interesting because John Carpenter has a stellium in Scorpio. He has Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, and Mars. And Ted has 3. Retrograde Mercury, which makes sense. A retrograde Venus, which really makes sense because there was such a level of hatred towards women, and Jupiter, so which would exacerbate and expand everything. So you can see how these things kind of play out. But again, this is one of the many things I'm really enjoying about this, studying and going through and finding out this information is, you know, these people having these same exact placements and different ways, different levels of consciousness, different ways of expressing it. But obviously we've heard of these people. And then the third one with a similar one is Michel Gauguin, who we talked about earlier. He has Scorpio, Mercury and Scorpio on the IC. So, you know, three very different expressions of that scorpionic energy. So we'll start with doing the pictures last on this one. Both of these men had defined ideas about other. Both men redefined what relating to other meant. Excuse me. And both have affected countless millions of people, even today. And these people have been dead for a little while, these 2 individuals. The first one is Sigmund Freud. The second one is Adolf Hitler. They both have Sun in Taurus on the descendant. Taurus can be tough. You know, Taurus can really, you know, hold the line. I'm not saying that in Hitler's chart, this is the only thing that's operating, but it would definitely give him a strong sense of understanding about what, who he's, I mean, because obviously we're talking about with these 2 individuals, they've also got Scorpio rising. They've got Scorpio ascendants. So we're already talking about individuals. I mean, look at the piercingness. Both of them have these piercing eyes. These people were able, they were fearless. I mean, they didn't have any trouble getting into people's business. They didn't have any trouble affecting people's lives. Hitler did it in a much more grotesque manner and from a much more hated place within himself. Freud, he had his own issues as well, and fortunately was able to do some things that really helped a lot of people. But, you know, at the end of the day, you know, he still, you know, obviously had his things that he still had to work on. But, you know, just really interesting when you think about, you know, what a difference that can make when one uses their energies for good, or the force for good. And how about these people? Did they care about the rules? We don't pay taxes. The little people pay taxes. That's Leona Helmsley. Jack Kerouac, we said before, I have nothing to offer anyone except my own confusion. Mars in Sagittarius on the IC. He's just going to go wherever, you know, hey, the leaf fell this way, I'm going to go that way. Madonna. I love it. She's got her tongue sticking out. It really helps emphasize that about the rules. And this guy, oh my God, I keep forgetting about what his name is. And when you guys can pop in, I blanked his name. McCarthy, John McCarthy from the 1950s. And I love this line because this, you know, this is what, you know, this guy brought hell to so many people. You know, the fear of communism, the fear of all this stuff, and people who are gay and people who are artists. And, you know, it's like, so his line is, beware of the artists because they mix with all classes of society and therefore are the most dangerous. Yeah, I guess we're in trouble. I'm glad he's not around anymore. And then Bruce Jenner, very interestingly enough, we used to know him as Bruce Jenner, the Olympian. Now we know her as Caitlin. Sun in Scorpio on the ascendant. What is Scorpio? Scorpio is the sign of transformation. It's the sign, you know, and if this isn't a transformation, I mean, it's pretty amazing. And it's the sun and radiates, and she's not afraid to be seen. He wasn't afraid to be seen when he was a man, and she's not afraid to be seen as a woman. It's just, you know, really puts it out there. It's incredible. And then, and I have to admit, a few of the people, don't have set times. And so, you know, this is one of the examples where I just really feel I love including him. So I just put him in here anyway, but just as an example, but I don't have a birth time for him. But since he's Indian, I would imagine that the time's got to be right because the Vedics are so crucial about all that. But Sri Aurobindo, who is about ensouled matter and so many other wonderful things. One of his wonderful quotes is, "The real difficulty is always in ourselves, not in our surroundings." Now, this is a very wise man. Then we have Bernard Carrick. He was a New York Police Department, New York Police Commissioner who did some really questionable things around 9/11 and didn't really operate probably from the highest standard. And so this is why I have the higher and lower consciousness expressions, because they both have Jupiter in Leo on the ascendant. And you can imagine how Jupiter in Leo on the ascendant can affect people, because right now, well, I mean, not right now, but for the last, I mean, I don't know, I don't even want to count how long it's been, but, you know, the United States, we have a president who has Mars in Leo on the ascendant, and we can see what kind of an effect that has. And unfortunately, I have them in here too, but, you know, that Leonine fixity, you know, that is, you know, it's similar to when we're talking about that Taurian energy, you know, when it when it decides this is what it wants, it can rationalize pretty much anything, you know. So it's really nice to see Sri Aurobindo here as a counterbalance to it. And does a maverick change the world? And I have to admit, I started doing this right at the very beginning and so it's kind of funny just to even have him on here, but, you know, we've all seen this over and over again and seeing the effect it has on the planet. He looks a little happier. He looks a little younger here. He's probably not as worn out as he is now from all the stuff he's been doing. So yeah, I'm not going to say much more about him. So if you have a planet on the angle or more than one, how many of you are aware of the effects your planets on the angles have on you and how they affect others? How many of you are aware that you have friends who also have planets on the angles, or family members or spouses? And did you have to learn to build a relationship to or with your maverick planets? Or did were you fortunate to have someone point out to me like I did? And how would you say you express your experiences of your maverick planets? So anyone who wants to answer any of these questions or wants to ask any other questions, let me see. I don't think, let me see, I do. Yeah, I'll just go back and then I think I'll do that and then I'll end with the last one. So if you have a planet on the angle, what would it take to empower and feed that force in you for making good in your relationships, your community and humanity? Good thing for us to ask ourselves, especially in these very trying times. What are the healthy expressions or master's level expressions of this or these planets in your life? Or are you stuck in the student level, which is keeping you bound and stuck in those places and alienating yourself from other people? As archetypal cheerleaders, we astrologers are theme finders and theme reminders on the path of life. So our job is always to empower ourselves and others to be the best they can be for each of us, as well as for the benefit of the collective. So, yeah, I mean, I have to say, especially in these times, you know, with what's going on the planet, what we're hearing about the climate, what we're seeing in our governments, what we're seeing about how society is going, many of us know that we're here, that this is a bonus round this lifetime. Many of us know this is one of those incredibly, incredibly packed experiences. And so I really feel that we are here to really make this change. And so these people with planet on the angles, I welcome you. I invite you all to rev up your engines and let your planet speak. Make sure that you're working from the highest level of consciousness, that you're working with your heart open, that you're doing things that are inclusive, that you're doing things for helping and improving people, and really make your mark. It's time. It's time for us to start changing this world. It's not looking pretty. And I know all of you out there, any of you who are listening to this, I know that you are conscious beings. I know that you are aware of so many things. And so put your heart and your mind together and be the beautiful archetype, the beautiful being you're here to be. Even if you don't have planets in the angle, be that beautiful archetype and beautiful being you're here to be. All of us are here to be an aspect of the divine, and God doesn't make any mistakes. He gives us problems. He puts things in our way. He gives us people who irritate the heck out of us and cause problems for all of us. But it just means that we have to work a little harder and call it forth. So that is my talk for today. So I'd be happy if anyone wants to answer any of these questions, or if you have any other questions you want to have from the talk. It looks like I have about 10 minutes left.
Yes, Michael, it's Linda again. Since you extended the orb right throughout the whole house, just about, I've added up mine, and I have 9 altogether. So I've got 3 outer planets on the angles, the nodes, the nodes on the 1st and the 7th, and also I've got Black Moon, Lilith, Chiron, Juno, and part of Fortune. And I think the ascendant first house has given me difficulty in my life, but getting much better now. What operates really well is Chiron on the IC in Aquarius. That's I'm happy with that one. And my Uranus and Pluto on the midheaven, I'm quite happy with them. Yeah, so, and I do have a question for you.
Sure.
Apparently planets, let's just talk about the ascendant for now. Apparently planets in the 12th, very close to the ascendant, are also angular. Would you agree with that?
Very much so. One of my favorite parts of the chart is actually the 12th house, first house ascendant line, because I just think there's just so much there. So I find when I talk about 12th house, because I'm a whole sign person, I basically talk about anything from above your ascendant going back almost into the sign before, depending on how it is, because it just plays out. But yeah, I see that to be very pivotal, definitely.
Yes, thank you. And I guess the closer they are to the exact angle, the stronger they would be. What do you think?
True. Most often, yes, except in the case of, I believe, the luminaries, which add a certain level. If it's the ruler of the ascendant, that's going to add a huge amount. It's going to also widen the orbs quite a bit. Also, if the ruler of the ascendant is in relationship with that planet, even if that planet isn't in angle to the, isn't in orb to the ascendant, maybe that, say you have Sag rising and you have Jupiter trining Mars, but that Mars is just above the ascendant and not in orb, I would actually say that probably is going to give some juice to it, because that Jupiter is going to add to it. So, I mean, it's just one of those things where you kind of have to kind of go in to feel it. And also, what's nice when you're doing readings with people, I think the most important thing to always do when it comes to orbs is to ask the individual. The more sensitive an individual is, the wider the orbs can be. Just like when you think about when a planet enters a sign, if you have planets in that sign, it's kind of like you can feel an activity with those other planets. They get activated.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the audience?
Hi, Michael. I have a question.
Hi, Wanda.
I have actually 2 planets, a very tight conjunction that's conjunct the ascendant.
Okay.
But I was kind of wondering, can this be applied to transits to the ascendant, especially with planets like Jupiter on out?
I would say so. I mean, I would say first and foremost, the main focus that I'm working on is when it happens in the birth chart. So that being the primary thing. But in the sense of like what you're saying is, like, say you have a couple of planets there and you haven't been really working with it, but then you have by transit, say Saturn, Uranus, Chiron, Neptune, or Pluto transiting it, I would say that would probably activate it, because I believe that the transits are activation points. It's like something that really it sets things off. So like, if something's been sitting there kind of quiet and hasn't been paying much attention to, it's that thing that can kind of come up and wake it up a little bit. Whereas the progression is kind of like a little more like it's just I perceive the progression as more as an unfolding in a cycle. So yeah, I'd say that's really powerful. And then with having 2 planets conjunct your ascendant, I see conjunctions as being kind of like, you know, conjoined twins, you know, so it's like that part of, I mean, as an example, I mean, I'm one of those people born in 65 where my Uranus and Pluto are, you know, basically on top of one another. And I like to say that, you know, people from my generation probably don't really have the ability to differentiate between shocking transformation. You know, we think it's together. Shocking transformation goes together. So it'd be interesting to see kind of like how you play with what the wording is with those two planets and what you come up with. What two planets do you have on your ascendant, Wanda? Is it okay to ask?
We're in the same generation. I have the Uranus-Pluto conjunction, and they're both conjunct the ascendant.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that really, to me, even gets into an even more, yeah, I mean, to be honest, I haven't even gotten, it's giving me goosebumps, I have to admit. I don't know if you can see them, but I love Plutonic people, and I wonder why I love you, Wanda. Pluto and Uranus there. That, I really feel then when, especially with Pluto on the angles, that that is like you are a Plutonic vibration frequency. You know, you put out and, you know, you just pulse an aura. I like to say that, you know, like if you're sitting in a room by yourself, someone comes into the room, they'll look around and they'll all of a sudden react, and they'll see you as a person, and they'll have this reaction, but they don't know that the reaction they're having is because of you, because that energy is so incredibly intense. And so how I don't know if it's okay I'm going to ask it and you can tell me whether it's okay or not. How was it for you growing up and wearing that energy? I mean, I would think that would have been I would think that astrology was an amazing gift of awareness for you.
Spot on. Yes, it was very, very, very difficult. So yeah, when I did find astrology, ironically, it was when Saturn was in Leo going over my moon. Nice. Is when I started digging into it, because I had to find out why.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's hard. I mean, there are so many of us who have these really powerful Pluto Uranus things, and it's so painful. I mean, I really do experience it. I mean, I know it in myself, because people don't know how to understand it. People don't know how to be in relationship, and especially a child growing up does not know how to wear and express that energy. And so family members, I mean, that's the thing where you can get reactions from people, and it's so unconscious, and it hits us in these ways that we don't even know. All we know is that there's this thing like, is there something wrong with me? Am I not okay? Is there something, you know, and there's that ongoing thing, which is really sad, because it doesn't, it's not the truth. I'm so happy that you found astrology. I'm so happy you're here. And the wonderful thing is to keep learning and growing with it, because it's just going to keep unfolding. And I am excited to see and experience your transformational, shockingly transformative nature. I see there are some chats going on here, but let's see. Okay. Diana, you had a question regarding T-squares with the angles. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just had a question. For example, I have Pluto in Scorpio, conjunct the ascendant, have Mars in Aquarius, and Sun Jupiter in the 7th house in Taurus, right on the ascendant as well. Okay. So that leaves me open with Leo in the 10th.
Yep.
With no planets in it. So I was thinking, what would be your perspective of all that energy merging in the squares?
That's a beautiful point, because Diana, what I usually find is when people have, in fact, I talk about it in my relationship classes, like when a person has a T-square like that, how many Leo people do you have in your life?
None. They're all Scorpios, for the most part.
Wow. Okay. Wow. You have just broken my ongoing understanding of it. Because usually what I find is that people who have that one missing leg tend to really manifest it. So one thing I would do is try and find some healthy Leonine individuals who you can have some experiences with that and see how you can play it. But I would say for you probably, and then again maybe not, because in a way, like probably. Is it more peaceful for you at home when you're away from people, or do you feel pulled in lots of places when you're at home?
If I'm pulled what?
Are you pulled in lots of places when you are home?
No. I don't know if this correlates to Pluto being on the ascendant on Scorpio, but I love my time alone.
Good. Yeah, I would think so.
I protest for it if I have to.
Yeah, I would think, to be honest, with that level of energy that you're running through your system, that you really need your downtime. But as far as the question, as far as like how I would do it, for each of the planets, I would look at each one of them. I mean, I would say, okay, for your Pluto and Scorpio, you know, really understanding and embracing the fact that you are going to appear to others as a transformer, and to really, you know, be clear about the people who you're seeing as transformers in your life, and find those out. And then, oh, we're right on time. And then with the Mars, if you want, you can text. I mean, if you want to like email or call me, I'd be happy to help you out with that a little bit, because it looks like we're out of time. I apologize, Diana.
I just was looking for perspective more on it. So
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you everyone so much for a wonderful time. I really appreciate talking with everyone, and bless you all.
Great. Thank you so much, Michael. Wow, that was so interesting. I loved it. Looking forward to seeing you again. Would you all please thank Michael Bartlett, everyone?
Thank you.
Awesome chat. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. Really great.
Bless you all. Thanks.